Can you hear me? Sophie's voice was barely audible as she leaned closer, her breath a gentle warmth against the man's ear. The harsh scent of hospital disinfectant hung in the air, mingling with the steady rhythm of medical equipment. But in this fragile moment, it felt as though the world had paused just for them. "I know I shouldn't feel this way," she whispered, her gaze tracing the still features of the man lying motionless before her. His hospital chart listed him as patient 4721, another nameless victim awaiting identification. But in her heart, Sophie had given him a different name. Marcus, she called him, inspired by the inscription on a medallion found among his belongings when they'd brought him in after the terrible accident. No visitors had come. No one had claimed him. His body bore the marks of trauma from the crash that nearly claimed his life. Yet even in his comatose state, there was an undeniable strength in his jawline, his high cheekbones, and the slight arch of his eyebrows that stirred something deep within her. Before we continue with today's story, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me keep sharing these inspiring tales that touch your day. Thank you for your support. Sophie wasn't one for fantasies. Not anymore. Life had taught her harsh lessons in the most unforgiving ways. Her father had succumbed to pancreatic cancer 3 years ago after a grueling battle that left her not just heartbroken, but hollowed out. Her mother had abandoned them when Sophie was only 9. Since then, it had been just her and her father against the world. Nursing wasn't merely a profession for Sophie. It was her shield against the helplessness she'd felt watching her father fade away. But with this mysterious patient, something had shifted in her heart. She had never voiced these feelings to anyone. Not to her colleagues, not even in her private thoughts, but alone in this room, under the clinical light and the rhythmic beeping of monitors, she had begun to confide pieces of herself to his silence. Tonight, the weight of her unspoken emotions had become too heavy to carry alone. "I see you," she said softly, her fingers brushing against his. "Not the medical equipment or your condition. I see who you are, even though I don't know your name or if you'll ever open your eyes again." His hand remained motionless beneath hers. His chest rose and fell with the mechanical assistance of the ventilator. No flicker of response, no twitch of recognition, nothing. But trapped within that broken body, locked in by trauma and silence, Ethan Chase was screaming. He heard everything he had been hearing for weeks. The world outside was initially muffled, like voices underwater, but Sophie's voice had cut through the fog with crystal clarity. It was the first sound that penetrated the darkness surrounding him. Ethan couldn't recall the accident clearly. Fragments flashed in his consciousness, blinding headlights, shouting, the violent jerk of the steering wheel beneath his hands. Then nothing but blackness. When awareness returned, he discovered himself imprisoned within his own body, unable to speak or move, yet fully conscious and desperately aware. Sophie's voice had become his lifeline to reality, to hope. She spoke to him as a person, not just a body requiring care. She shared stories about other patients. The elderly gentleman in room 213 who insisted on wearing his bow tie even in his hospital gown, and the young girl down the hall who colored pictures of unicorns for the nursing staff. She talked about books she was reading, movies she missed seeing, her irrational fear of thunderstorms, and dreams she kept hidden in a worn journal she shared with no one else. And tonight, she had confessed something he never expected, that she had fallen in love with him. Ethan desperately wanted to open his eyes, to squeeze her hand in return, to tell her that her voice had kept him tethered to life, but his body remained frustratingly unresponsive. Sophie sighed, slowly withdrawing her hand. "I shouldn't have said that," she murmured. "It's just, I come here every day, and somehow I feel like you're more present than most people I meet who are walking and talking. You listen, and when I'm with you, I don't feel quite so alone." A tear escaped from the corner of her eye, but she quickly brushed it away. She leaned forward once more, her forehead gently touching his. "Whoever you are, please come back. Please wake up." Then she straightened, adjusted her scrub top, and turned toward the door. "Good night, Marcus," she said softly. "Sleep well." Behind her, the heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. But within Ethan Chase's imprisoned consciousness, something powerful was stirring. He had a name. He had a past. He had secrets that could prove deadly. And now he had found one compelling reason to fight his way back. Her name was Sophie. Before the silence, before the machines and sterile hospital sheets, before becoming a prisoner in his own body, Ethan Chase had lived another life entirely. Born into nothing, Ethan had navigated the turbulent waters of the foster system, passed from one temporary home to another. He learned early to observe, adapt, and survive. His mind was razor-sharp, always calculating, always seeking patterns in chaos. He devoured books by flashlight under thin blankets and taught himself computer programming using discarded laptops from community donations. By 25, he had launched his first technology company. By 33, he had become a celebrated innovator in the tech industry. And by 36, he had transformed Chase Dynamics into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise specializing in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence for humanitarian applications, safeguarding hospitals, refugee networks, and government systems from malicious attacks. Ethan could have pursued wealth alone, but he believed technology should serve a higher purpose. That conviction made him influential and dangerous to some. The betrayal he never saw coming was from Alex. Alex Chase, his brother by adoption, was the only family Ethan had. Raised together in a group home, they had defended each other against bullies, shared meager resources, dreams, and even their deepest fears. Ethan brought Alex into his company, gave him authority and opportunity, a future handed to him rather than earned. But somewhere along that journey, Alex changed. He began to view Ethan's idealism as weakness, his compassion as vulnerability. And one night, everything unraveled when Ethan discovered a massive data breach orchestrated by foreign contractors embedded within one of their corporate partners, a breach Alex had secretly authorized to sell confidential information for personal gain. Ethan confronted him privately, hoping their bond would prevail over greed. But Alex's response was chilling, calculated. "You built this empire with your brilliance," Alex had said, "but now it's going to be mine." Hours later, while driving to meet with federal investigators, Ethan's car malfunctioned catastrophically. The brakes failed, the steering locked, the vehicle careened off a mountain road, and darkness claimed him. When consciousness returned within his paralyzed body, he knew Alex had temporarily succeeded. Meanwhile, Alex Chase appeared on national news broadcasts, his expression appropriately solemn, his voice heavy with practiced grief. "We've lost a visionary," he told the cameras. "My brother Ethan wasn't just a brilliant innovator, but the only real family I've ever known. We will honor his legacy by continuing the work he was so passionate about." No body had been recovered from the wreckage, a detail that suited Alex perfectly. He had paid substantial bribes to ensure that questions went unasked and investigations remained superficial. Ethan Chase was officially declared dead, and in a quiet hospital room, registered under patient 4721, he lay comatose, his voice silenced, his identity erased. But Sophie was beginning to piece together the puzzle. One afternoon, while changing the bandages on his arm, she noticed something beneath the antiseptic wipes, a faint outline of ink barely visible through his pale skin. Carefully cleaning away layers of medical adhesive, she revealed it clearly, a small, intricate tattoo of a falcon soaring through stylized lightning bolts, a symbol she remembered from news coverage about Chase Dynamics. Her pulse quickened. She examined his personal effects more carefully and discovered a platinum medallion tucked into the hospital bedding, as if someone had attempted to hide it during the trauma intake. It bore a unique inscription, EC, from darkness light. She stared at it, her heart racing. Why would an unidentified patient with no signs of homelessness or addiction have such a meaningful, expensive medallion? Why did his face suddenly seem so familiar? She retrieved her phone, hesitated, then searched for Ethan Chase. The image that appeared on her screen made her nearly drop the device. It was him, with shorter hair and without the bruising, but unmistakably the same man. A photo from a technology conference just months earlier. If this man was indeed Ethan Chase, he wasn't only alive, he was in grave danger. And Sophie was now the only person who knew. Each night, after completing her rounds, and when the medical floor had grown quiet, Sophie returned to his room. Initially, these visits were purely professional, checking his vitals, adjusting his forelines, and monitoring his breathing. But gradually, something more profound developed. She began talking to him, sharing her thoughts, revealing parts of herself she had concealed from the world. Sitting beside his bed, she would pull the visitor's chair close, rest her arms on the edge of the mattress, and simply talk. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes with quiet laughter. Sometimes, when emotions overwhelmed her, with tears. "You would have liked him," she said one evening, gently wiping his forehead with a cool cloth. "My father. He was stubborn but kind, with an absolute passion for jazz music. When he died, I thought, I thought I'd never truly feel anything again. Ethan remained motionless, his features locked in silent contemplation, but inside his mind was growing more responsive. The fog dulling his senses was gradually thinning. Sophie's voice had become his only connection to the world, a sound he awaited with increasing awareness. She told him how she had come to work at Riverside Memorial, abandoning her plans to join Doctors Without Borders to care for her father during his final months. How she sometimes wondered whether she'd made the right choice, until she met this nameless man who said nothing yet seemed to listen with his entire being. I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights, she mused one night, opening a dog-eared copy of a travel memoir. Not just for their beauty, but for that moment of magic, when the sky itself seems to breathe with color and life. She hummed melodies, sometimes barely audible. She confided her childhood fears, awkward adolescent memories, the college sweetheart who broke her trust, and the dreams she kept in a journal hidden beneath her mattress. You're the only one who knows these things, she said softly one night. Isn't that strange? You can't even speak to me, yet I've told you more than I've shared with anyone in years. In his mind, Ethan was calling her name. He could sense her presence like warmth upon his skin. Her voice reached into his darkness and embraced his fractured consciousness like healing hands. He remembered the first time she sang to him. A gentle lullaby, her voice uncertain but pure. It pierced through the haze like the first light of dawn. That night, he dreamed for the first time since the accident. Each story, each whisper, each quiet laugh became the foundation rebuilding the broken structures within his mind. Then, a breakthrough occurred. One night, after Sophie finished reading a letter she had written to her late father but never sent, she leaned forward, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I miss you," she whispered, though she wasn't certain whether she was speaking to her father or the man in the bed. She rested her head briefly against his arm, exhausted from the emotional weight, then stood to leave. But as she turned toward the door, she froze. A single tear had escaped from the corner of his eye, trailing slowly down his temple. Her breath caught. For a moment, she remained perfectly still, afraid to trust her own vision. "Marcus," she whispered, stepping back to his side. Was that? Did you cry?" She leaned close, searching his face intently. "If you can hear me, if you're still in there, please do something. Anything. Just let me know you're here." But there was no second tear, no twitch of fingers, no flutter of eyelashes. Only the steady rhythm of the heart monitor and the soft hum of medical equipment. Still, Sophie remained by his side for several minutes, tears gathering in her own eyes. She reached down and gently wiped the tear from his face, her hand trembling slightly. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew you were still in there." That night, she paused at the threshold before leaving, looking back one final time. "I'll wait as long as it takes," she promised, her voice barely audible. And in the darkness of his unmoving body, Ethan Chase held onto her words like precious oxygen. Because now he had confirmation. Not only had he heard her, but he had touched her heart. And for the first time since the crash, he truly believed he would find his way back. Sophie arrived at the hospital earlier than usual the next morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the stark white corridors of the intensive care unit with soft amber light. When she entered his room, she stopped abruptly. Someone was standing at the foot of his bed, a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and an official-looking visitor's badge attached to his lapel. He was middle-aged with calculating eyes that seemed to absorb every detail while revealing nothing. He turned as she entered. "You must be Nurse Bennett," he said, his smile thin and practiced. "I'm Harrison Powell, Regional Director for Medicore Healthcare Systems. I'm here regarding this patient." Sophie hesitated, her instincts immediately on alert. "I wasn't aware of any corporate visits scheduled today." "We don't schedule visits for internal assessments," he replied smoothly. "This patient falls under our custodial jurisdiction, and we've finally located a transfer facility with superior neurological capabilities. He'll be moved this evening." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "Moved? Without physician approval? His attending doctor hasn't mentioned anything about this." "Dr. Mercer has been informed. This is being handled through executive channels," he said dismissively. "We believe the patient's long-term prognosis will improve with more specialized care." Something felt deeply wrong. Sophie sensed it viscerally. The way this man's gaze lingered too intently on her patient. How he referred to him as property rather than a person. She glanced at the still form in the bed. Could he sense this too? Was he screaming inside, as she felt suddenly compelled to do? "I'm sorry, Mr. Powell," she said firmly. but I cannot permit a transfer without proper protocol, especially for a patient with no identified next of kin. He studied her for a moment, that artificial smile never wavering. You're quite the dedicated nurse, Miss Bennett. Admirable. I imagine you develop quite an attachment to your patients. I do my job, she replied evenly, meeting his gaze. That includes preventing unauthorized removals. The man chuckled, shaking his head slightly. It's not unauthorized, but I do appreciate your vigilance. He left moments later, but not before giving her patient one last, lingering look, as if committing every feature to memory. Sophie remained uneasy throughout her shift. She contacted Dr. Mercer, who was attending a medical conference and was completely unaware of any transfer orders. When she checked with hospital administration, they insisted that a corporate representative from Medicorps had full authorization, but the documentation had been recently modified without a traceable timestamp. That evening, she stayed by his side, not leaving even for meals. Every instinct warned her to protect him. What Sophie didn't realize was that Harrison Powell was merely a disguise. Behind it stood Alex Chase, cleverly altered, operating under a fabricated identity complete with high-level access credentials. He had tracked Ethan's location through private investigators, and upon confirming his brother was alive, had moved swiftly to eliminate the threat. Sophie had become an unexpected obstacle. 2 days later, she was summoned to the hospital administrator's office. "I'm sorry, Sophie," the administrator said with practiced sympathy. "There have been reports of inappropriate conduct. Apparently, you've been engaging in excessive personal interaction with a non-responsive patient. Whispering, singing, physical contact beyond standard care protocols." Sophie's face drained of color. "Those allegations are completely fabricated. Who reported this?" "I can't disclose that information," the administrator replied, avoiding her eyes. "But the board is concerned. Until we complete a thorough investigation, you're officially suspended." As she walked out of the building, her ID badge confiscated, Sophie felt numb with shock. But beneath the hurt and sense of betrayal, a fire began to burn. Whoever wielded enough power to fabricate accusations and manipulate hospital procedures was clearly targeting her patient, and she was determined not to let them succeed. The hospital corridors felt unnaturally silent. The same floors Sophie had walked daily with purpose now echoed with emptiness as she made what might be her final visit. Her credentials were gone, her position suspended, her future uncertain. But she had one last thing to do. She stood in the doorway to his room, steadying herself against the frame. The lights were dimmed. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm. He lay as always, silent, motionless, profoundly alone. But this time, she wasn't a nurse on duty. She was just Sophie, and this was goodbye. She approached slowly, the lump in her throat growing with each step. Her fingertips brushed his as they had countless times before, but now her touch trembled with emotion. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, sinking into the chair beside him. "I tried. I really tried." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. She gripped his hand tightly. "They're going to take you away, and I can't stop them. I don't even know where they're sending you or if you'll be safe." Ethan heard every word. Each syllable was simultaneously a dagger and a lifeline. Inside, he screamed, not with fear but with desperate determination. His mind pushed relentlessly against the walls of his broken body. "Move. Speak. Do something. Anything." Sophie leaned closer, resting her forehead against the edge of the bed. "I shouldn't have said I loved you. It crossed every boundary, but I meant it. Heaven help me, I meant every word. You made me feel alive again. You gave me a reason to believe there might still be good in this world, even after everything I've lost." Ethan's consciousness surged. Every cell in his body strained to respond, but the signals couldn't break through the barrier. "I don't know who you really are," she whispered through her tears. "But you matter to me, and no matter what they say, I will never forget you." She rose slowly, brushing a gentle kiss against his forehead. "Goodbye, Marcus." She turned and walked toward the door, not looking back. If she had, she might have witnessed the faintest movement beneath the sheet. Ethan wasn't ready to surrender. Not to his condition, not to this moment. Alone in the darkness, he summoned everything within him. Every memory of her laughter, every word she had spoken, every dream she had shared. He focused it into a single, desperate command. "Move." Pain flared through his mind like lightning. His right hand twitched slightly. It wasn't much, barely perceptible, but it moved. His index finger lifted almost imperceptibly. The effort nearly made him lose consciousness, but a spark had ignited. The barrier between mind and body had begun to crack. He was still here. He could still fight. And now, more than ever, he had something worth returning for. The moment Ethan's finger moved, everything changed. A night shift nurse checking vitals noticed the subtle neurological response on the monitor. Within hours, a comprehensive neurological assessment was underway. The results were cautiously optimistic. By the end of the week, Ethan had moved all fingers on his right hand and blinked in response to simple commands. It wasn't a miracle. It was the beginning of a resurrection. Day by day, his mind pushed further into consciousness, dormant muscles straining to awaken. Electrodes mapped every neural signal like a roadmap back to himself. Physical therapists joined his medical team, and a speech pathologist began working to retrain his vocal cords. Weeks passed in grueling effort. His first complete word wasn't yes or hello. It was Sophie. The medical staff exchanged confused glances. They asked him to repeat himself, and he did, this time with greater force. Sophie, he wrote shakily with a pen strapped to his hand, the letters uneven but legible. Find Sophie Bennett. By then, Ethan had access to a tablet. His memory had fully returned, along with the fury and betrayal of Alex's deception. But Ethan didn't act impulsively. He acted with precision. He requested his personal belongings from the day of the crash. After some persistence, the items were recovered, including what appeared to be a damaged smartwatch. Only it wasn't merely a watch. It was a prototype device designed by Chase Dynamics, an advanced voice recorder and data storage unit embedded in wearable technology for internal testing. The moment Ethan accessed the cloud backup linked to the device, he found the evidence he needed, a recording of their confrontation the night of the accident. Alex's voice rang out with chilling clarity. You should have walked away, brother. You and your precious ethics. They're going to bury you. Then came sounds of struggle and the eerie silence that preceded the crash. Everything was documented. Every damning word. Ethan arranged a confidential meeting with his trusted legal counsel, who had quietly maintained loyalty even after Alex's takeover. They worked swiftly, preparing both legal action and a carefully orchestrated media strategy. Within 48 hours, Ethan Chase was ready to reclaim his life. The press conference was held in the main auditorium of Chase Dynamics headquarters. Journalists buzzed with shock, disbelief, and anticipation. The man presumed dead walked onto the stage, thinner, paler, but unbroken. Camera flashes illuminated the room as Ethan stood confidently behind the podium. I was declared dead, he began, his voice raspy but steady. But it wasn't death that claimed me. It was a betrayal, greed, and the man responsible shares my name and once shared my trust. Gasps rippled through the audience. He paused, then looked directly into the cameras. But it wasn't vengeance that kept me alive. It wasn't the determination to reclaim my company. It was the voice of one person, a nurse who sat beside me night after night and spoke to me as though I were still fully human. She loved me when I was nothing but a ghost. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Her name is Sophie Bennett. And if she's watching, I want her to know I heard every word. Across town, in a modest apartment, Sophie sat frozen on her sofa. Her tea had grown cold in her hands. On the screen before her, the man she thought lost forever was speaking directly to her. Ethan Chase, alive. Her breath caught as she listened to him describe the accident, the conspiracy, the recording. But when he said her name, her full name, before the entire world, she burst into tears. He had heard her. Every word, every confession, every quiet moment when she thought no one was listening. Back at the press conference, Ethan delivered the final blow that would end Alex's reign. He played the audio recording. The room erupted with noise, shouting journalists, ringing phones, frantic whispers. Alex, watching from his penthouse, stood paralyzed as the full weight of his actions unfolded before the world. Legal teams were already mobilizing. Investigations reopened. Shareholders called emergency meetings. The empire Alex had stolen was crumbling by the second. But Ethan cared only about one thing now. He handed his prepared statement to his assistant and leaned into the microphone once more. I have walked through fire, he said softly. But love pulled me back. I have something far more important to reclaim than a company. And with that, he left the stage, leaving behind a world reeling from revelations. All that mattered now was finding her. Ethan moved with quiet determination. Though still recovering physically, his mind was sharper than ever. Trauma had stripped away distractions, leaving only focus and purpose. With his legal team and a small group of trusted allies, he launched a comprehensive investigation into Alex's activities during his months of presumed death. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Alex had falsified documents to assume emergency control over chase dynamics. He had dismantled core humanitarian projects, funneled money through shell companies, and authorized illegal surveillance on multiple former executives. But the most incriminating evidence came from Alex's own arrogance. The recording from the prototype watch, which Ethan had revealed during his public return, ignited a firestorm of legal action. Authorities now had cause to investigate deeper. Search warrants were executed. Email servers were seized. Within days, a pattern of fraud, manipulation, and attempted murder emerged with undeniable clarity. Alex attempted to flee. He vanished from his luxury apartment, disappeared from public view, but his freedom was short-lived. Authorities located him at a private estate in Belize, hiding behind layers of false identities and surrounded by increasingly desperate legal representatives. He was extradited to the United States within 3 days. The media exploded with coverage. The technology industry was shaken to its core. But for Ethan, this wasn't about headlines or corporate drama. It was about closure. He requested one final meeting, face-to-face, which was granted under strict security protocols. When Ethan entered the detention room, Alex looked up with a faint, bitter smile. Well, he said, reclining in the chair as if it were a throne. The dead man walks. Ethan observed him silently at first, studying the man who had once been his brother, his partner, his closest ally, and now his betrayer. You try to kill me, Ethan said quietly. Alex shrugged dismissively. I try to save the company. You were willing to sink it for some idealistic crusade. You sold people's safety for your ambition. You were wasting our potential. Alex snapped, his composure faltering. We could have been untouchable. You wanted to be some kind of tech saint. Ethan leaned forward. I trusted you. You were my family. Alex's smirk returned. And look where that got you. Silence stretched between them. Then Alex added, but you did win, brother. The world adores you. You reclaimed your throne. The media worships your resurrection story. His voice softened with mockery. And that nurse, that sweet, naive nurse who whispered to your unconscious body like a child with a doll. I've watched every news clip. She wept for you on national television. You should consider yourself fortunate. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he maintained his composure. She saved me, he said simply. Her love was genuine, something you'll never comprehend. Alex's smile faltered slightly. Perhaps not, he conceded, leaning back. But let's be honest. You may have everything now, power, fame, redemption, but you don't have her. You don't possess her heart. For a moment, the words struck home. But Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he rose to his feet. You're wrong, he said quietly. Because I never wanted to possess her heart. I only wanted to be worthy of it. Alex scoffed. So what now? You want revenge? A final moment to gloat before my downfall. Ethan shook his head. No, he said softly. I came to tell you something else. Alex raised an eyebrow questioningly. I forgive you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alex blinked, momentarily stunned. You what? I forgive you, Ethan repeated. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your poison any longer. For the first time, Alex's composure shattered completely. His smirk vanished. His mouth opened, then closed again wordlessly. He glanced around the detention room, as if truly realizing his circumstances for the first time. You'll face justice for what you did, Ethan continued. But I won't allow hatred to define the rest of my life. Alex stared at him, hollowed by this unexpected response. You always believed forgiveness was weakness, Ethan said. But it's the strongest choice a person can make. And with that, Ethan turned and walked out. Behind him, Alex remained seated, alone, silenced, and for the first time in his life, truly defeated, not by power but by grace. Ethan didn't look back. He had one more precious thing to reclaim. Not a corporation, not a legacy, but love itself. The road winding through the countryside curved past meadows of wildflowers and gentle groves of maple trees. Ethan hadn't experienced such serenity in years. After the chaos, the courtrooms, and the endless media scrutiny, he had disappeared from public view. Not to hide, but to find something irreplaceable. And now he had. The community clinic was modest, constructed of weathered brick at the edge of a small town. Its hand-painted sign read Pine Haven Health Center. No cameras, no boardrooms, just a waiting area, a handful of dedicated staff, and compassion in the air. Ethan stepped inside. At the reception desk, dressed in simple teal scrubs with her hair tied back, stood Sophie Bennett. She was reviewing patient files, unaware that the man she believed lost forever was just steps away. He watched her for a moment, then said softly, "I heard you." Sophie froze. She looked up, stunned. Their eyes met across the room. Her lips parted, but words failed her. "I heard every word," Ethan said, moving closer. "Your stories, your songs, your tears. I was there all along. I just couldn't answer." Tears welled in her eyes, and as he reached for her, she rushed into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed against his chest. "You brought me back," he whispered, holding her tightly. "You saved me." They sat beneath a towering oak tree behind the clinic that afternoon. Sophie asked him about his plans for the future. "No more corporate boardrooms," Ethan said firmly. "I want to build something meaningful, something that truly heals." He shared his vision for a community wellness center named after her father, the James Bennett Healing Foundation, a place where compassionate care would take precedence over profit margins. Sophie cried again, this time with joy mingled with gratitude. The center opened the following spring on a sunlit piece of land just outside town. It offered medical care, counseling services, and a genuine human connection to all who needed it. Ethan worked alongside Sophie, no longer a headline or a billionaire figurehead, but a healer in his own right. That summer, beneath a sky painted with sunset hues, they married in a meadow filled with wildflowers. No grandiose venue, no media coverage, just loved ones, neighbors, and patients seated on simple wooden benches. Many had once shared their pain with Ethan and Sophie. Now they shared in their joy. Sophie wore a simple ivory dress adorned with tiny blue flowers. Ethan wore a navy suit and a wedding band engraved with the word always. When the officiant invited them to exchange vows, Ethan took her hands in his. "You whispered to me through the darkness," he said, his voice rich with emotion. "When the world believed I was gone, you remained. You offered something more powerful than medicine. You gave me unconditional love." Tears glistened on Sophie's cheeks as he continued. "You gave me a reason to return. I promised to always listen the way you did when no one else believed I was still present." Sophie's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "I spoke to you as though you were fully alive because in my heart, you never left. I vowed never to forget the man I came to know, even when the world tried to erase you." They sealed their promises with a kiss as gentle applause swept through the meadow. Later that evening, beneath stars scattered like diamonds across the night sky, Ethan raised a glass. "I once believed that survival was a miracle," he said thoughtfully, "that simply waking up constituted victory." He looked at Sophie with profound tenderness. "But I was wrong. It wasn't mere life that saved me." He smiled. It was love. The gathering fell silent, then erupted in renewed applause. And in that peaceful night, wrapped in the embrace of the woman who had never stopped believing in him, Ethan Chase was no longer the man the world had once declared dead. He was the man who had been reborn through love. What began with silence, pain, and whispers in darkness concluded with healing, hope, and a new beginning. Ethan and Sophie's journey reminds us that sometimes the most profound miracles don't emerge from technology or fortune, but from the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who refuses to abandon hope.